focus group. Now, my focus group consisted of 4 people. They all watched our music video, and then I asked questions which were very similar to that of the post-production music video survey. I filmed them, and I found it was much more intimate and much more personable in terms of how and the way in which I was asking questions, and I felt it was much more noticeably useful by extracting audience feedback in that way than the post-production survey, which was written, as well as the social media feedback online. I found that it was more useful in terms of the way in which I approached it, because I was able to expand on my questions or ask further questions, and in return they would be expanding and elaborating on their own answers. And I even thought of ideas which my group and I hadn't even thought of, such as their interpretation of the song and how they interpreted or understood the narrative of our interpretation of the song. For instance, one respondent felt that our interpretation worked with the breakup of the female and the male actors, like the protagonists. This is something that we weren't actually trying to angle in our music video, but it's very interesting for her to pick up, because she noticed the theory in which we used it, which is a narrative theory in terms of having the equilibrium theory, in terms of something that you have initially, in which case they are together, and then they break up, and then a new equilibrium is found in which case they were together again. This was not quite the way in which we interpreted it. It was more in terms of youth representations, and especially for the female protagonist, where we'd have objectifications of her, and so that was the equilibrium, the initial equilibrium of her facing her or accepting her fate as a young woman who faces such objectifications. Meanwhile, we had the other male actor who was also equally accepting negative stereotypes of young people, and then this swiftly transitioned into them breaking the equilibrium, in which case they were fighting against these negative stereotypes and objectifications, and so a new equilibrium was built. And so listening to the way in which our audience interpreted our own ideas was very interesting, because in some ways they developed on our ideas, and they also found alternative readings in our media product. And so it's always very interesting, because perhaps it could be the sense that we could improve on the way in which we created our narrative. And in terms of the focus group feedback, this was probably the utmost important response, which again pans across the post-production survey responses in terms of improvement, which is that they believed some shots were just far too shaky. So the handheld camera shots, again, in which the actress is running, were just too unclear and therefore too unprofessional, and so using a more high-tech gadget such as the GoPro probably would have been a better use of technology, as opposed to hand holding the camera in a freehand, candid movement, because it just made the shot slightly too unclear and therefore too amateur. And just ideas like this, such as use of actors and location as well, or moreover how the audience, so as our audience, how they could identify with the actors and the ideas which were held within the music video. So the very first reason that they gave in the ways in which they could identify with our music video was the age. Now this age was a very big or significant factor in our music video. We wanted to represent our audience, our target audience, by actors a similar age, so they could instantly and immediately identify with them. Again, use of actors was effective in representing the target audience, such as young adults, in which they called them cool in terms of their lifestyle and the way they represented a normal teenage life. Hearing these answers back, such as the ways in which they could identify the target audience, very much consolidated our own ideas and representations, because this is the type of identification that we wanted to portray in our music video. I suppose one slightly controversial question would be the negative representations and how accurate or inaccurate they are. Now, the more predominant answer, I would say, is that we are more accurate in terms of our negative representations of youth, especially the aggressive and careless and carefree youth, where especially through the costume as well, they found that it was very much effective in terms of the way we were portraying these negative representations, and through a media language such as mise-en-scène, especially through facial expression, the aggressiveness really seeped through from the negative representations, and so to a very large extent our audience agreed that our negative representations were very much accurate. And so overall, I did find that the focus group was much more useful in terms of extracting information or ideas from our media product that was created, and I found it was much more useful than social media because they could definitely elaborate on their answers through a face-to-face approach. The social media feedback was less useful in the fact that they mostly commented very briefly on what they thought of the music video without elaborating on certain answers or how it could be improved. And I think it's the nature of this Web 2.0 technology and how users nowadays tend to use this technology. And what I mean by that is that it's very much in a convenient way. They only like to watch things for a very short time, comment, and then move on to another topic or another story. And so by posting it on social media, it was effective in terms of gaining audience awareness, but in terms of their feedback, it was very much limited in terms of very monosyllabic answers or less elaborated answers to develop on. Digipack and album advertisement questionnaires. Now, I found this extremely useful in terms of the features they would expect to see. Now, I had already conducted codes and convention research into such media products beforehand, but in order to make my media products more personable and personalised for my target audience, I needed an insight into what my audience would expect to find and what they would prefer. So, for instance, the design of the CD, I wanted certain information in terms of what they preferred or expected to see on the design of the CD. And I received many comments saying that they preferred a more minimalistic and simplistic design of the CD. And so when I compared the media products I have already analysed, such as the script, compared to Coldplay CD, I found that one was conforming to the pop rock conventions of digipacks as very much full of information and condensed on their CD, as opposed to Coldplay, which was very much more simplistic. And so I was sort of torn between the two ideas, and by gaining this audience feedback, it allowed me to sort of consolidate my ideas or my queries and make it personal to them in terms of what they would expect or prefer to see the most. And by this, I realised that they wanted a more simplistic design, and so I went about designing this and creating this layout in a more simplistic way, and I find it's much more effective in this way. Also, the type of image that you would expect to find on a front cover of a digipack, most respondents suggested that they would have an image of the band, and I would agree with them, but it was just these ideas that I just wanted some confirmation on to suggest that they would prefer to see this, and if they were to find this on the digipack, they would be more inclined to buy and consume this product, having had this initial discussion of what they would expect to find. And so by gaining this audience feedback, it allowed me to research and plan my digipack and album advertisement, so I would know what would capture their attention more as my target audience, as well as the wider public as well. And so overall, I found that target audience feedback is incredibly useful in terms of making it much more personal and directly related to the audience. I learned how important it was, especially to improve media products, in terms of having post-production surveys for the media product as well as the ancillary. For instance, in some of my draft layouts of my ancillary tasks, I had comments on my blog saying that the initial design, such as the grey background of my album advertisement, wasn't very effective and it didn't allow the logo of my band to stand out very much. And gaining these comments from my audience allowed me to improve my designs further to make it much more effective and much more professional looking, and so it would fit to conventions of digipack and album advertisements, as well as relate to my own pop rock genre conventions. And it's always very useful to find insights or alternative perspectives to what I've created, again to allow me to improve. And I think the bottom line is that the usefulness of such audience feedback depends on how you are extracting it. So for instance, creating questionnaires on SurveyMonkey would be definitely useful in terms of creating graphs and pie charts and to extract data such as percentages, so I would know what was more prominent for one question, to find out which answer or response was more prominent than another, so I'd be more inclined to choose the more popular approach. But also, as I aforementioned, I found that the focus group was actually much more useful than social media as well as the post-production written survey or the paper survey, because it was much more personal, and the face-to-face intimate approach allows for the audience to be able to elaborate on their answers so they can develop on their ideas, which in turn helps me develop my media product and improve my own music video, ancillary tasks and such. And so, yeah, these are all of the ideas that I've come up with in terms of what I've learned in terms of my audience feedback.